You were crooked. Oh, now, okay. You were just like looking at something over there on
Oh,
your side.
yeah. Earlier it did look crooked to me though, so.
Webinar is now streaming live on Facebook.
Confirm, confirm. All right, I'm just gonna make sure it's doing what it should be doing, and then we can kick this off. We are now live. Okay, cool. It's legit. All right, I'm gonna spotlight me, and we'll get started. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the December meeting for Texas NORML. I'm Jack Finkel, the Executive Director, and I'm joined tonight by David Bass, our Director of Veteran Outreach, and Vanessa Akins, who is our awesome intern, first intern ever. And we love her very much. She's doing great things. So we're going to start off with me talking a little bit about the bills, the upcoming legislative session, and some important events coming up. And then we'll turn it over to Vanessa to talk about some data. And then we're going to turn it over to Dave to talk about veteran actions in the upcoming legislative session. So I have made a few notes to make sure that I don't miss anything. But first off, I wanted to let y'all know if you have any questions, you can drop it in the Q&A box below, or if you are watching us on Facebook, you can drop that in the comments. I'm going to make sure that I pull that up so that I can see it at the end. If you guys have questions, that's where we'll be taking them. All right, so there are the questions whenever they come in. I can look at them. All right, so first off, we have seen quite a few bills that have already been filed. In fact, there's already been 20 bills having to do with cannabis in some way that have been filed this session. So in the, reason of time, I'm going to maybe not go over all of them, but I am going to highlight some of the ones that have kind of risen to the top, in my opinion, of they hit a lot of the highlights that we want to make sure that are being touched on for different reasons. So the first one I want to start talking about actually is a bill that Representative Moody had filed in past session, but now Representative Zwiner has filed it, and it's HB 441. It's for penalty reduction. It would take an ounce or less and change it from a B to a C, and an ounce or over would be a Class B. There would be no arrest, a citation only, and there would be an expunction process as well. My understanding is there might be some driver's license protection that is also included in that. There's a similar bill coming from a Republican representative, Representative Steve Toth, and it's HB 99, and it's a penalty reduction taking 2 ounces or less from B to C. There's no suspension of the license if you pay some fees, and it's non-arrestable. So both of these do some really important things for penalty reduction that we want to see. Of course, we would love to see no consequences for being caught with this plant. In fact, we would rather see a retail market instituted so that it can benefit everyone and be safer. So to that note, I want to talk about Representative Moody's bill that he filed, HB 447, and it has to do with legalization. It would create a market for those that are 21 and up. It also creates the whole retail infrastructure. It allows you to possess 2.5 ounces of flour and 15 grams of concentrates. You may also gift the same amount to anyone. So that is pretty awesome. And it has personal cultivation, which a lot of people term as home grow. And that is very important. I know a lot of people like to be hands-on with their plants so that they know exactly what they are consuming. And it does explicitly disallow driving while under the influence of cannabis. Of course, driving under the influence will always probably be illegal in some way, but they wanted to make sure that for law enforcement, there was no concern that that would be something they'd be able to get away with, right? It also says that previous charges for possession would not disqualify you from being licensed as a licensee in the program. It would have a 10% tax rate, and they would distribute the revenues as follows. So this is pretty interesting to me. 10% to local municipalities with establishments, so with retail establishments in the municipality. 10% to counties that have establishments. 1% that would go to testing and control, and then the remainder would go to the public school teachers fund. So I thought that that was very interesting how they broke that down. A 10% tax rate is a very reasonable rate. And so I think that, what we've seen in some places is that the tax rate is really high and it drives people to kind of stay in the black market or the gray market, however you want to term it. So I also wanted to point out that in the Senate, Senator Jose Menendez has authored a cannabis bill again for medical cannabis, and it hit some really great notes for us. So it creates independent testing. It removes, the whole low THC verbiage and replaces it with medical throughout. There's reciprocity for non-resident cardholders. So currently, if you are a patient coming through Texas, your card is not a protection for having high THC cannabis. So if it was to have more than the 0.3% that is currently allowed for legal hemp, then you could be arrested. So that would be a protection for people that are traveling. It also protects parental rights. And it changes that physicians have to prescribe to medical practitioners, so it makes it a little bit more easy to access. As you know, there's only about, I believe in September, they said that there were 231 doctors that were currently enrolled to prescribe in the Texas, or registered to prescribe in the Texas Compassionate Use Program. It also would allow for home cultivation for registered patients. It would significantly reduce the fees for licensees. It would change the prescription language in the statute to recommend. As you may recall, there's some issue with prescribing a Schedule I drug. People can actually lose some of their licensing in the medical profession for prescriptions. And so some people have guess that maybe there's so few physicians participating because of that. So this would correct that issue. It also would greatly expand the list of conditions, and it would allow for physicians, PAs, and RNs to recommend cannabis. So a pretty great bill, especially coming from something that we have that's much more limited. I also wanted to note that there's several joint resolutions that have been authored. So you're probably familiar with the typical bill process. It's authored, it goes through the House, it goes through the Senate, it goes to the governor, it's signed to become law, right? Well, there's a joint resolution. It goes through a very similar process, except for it's authored, it goes through the House and must pass with a supermajority, goes through the Senate, must pass with a supermajority. It doesn't go to the governor, it goes straight to the Secretary of State, and at the next election, that is when it would be on the ballot. People would vote, and of course, there would be lots of advertising campaigns all around. And once we know the results, assuming it passes, it would, in the next legislative cycle, they would write out a statute, and then it would go through the regulatory process. So it is a much longer process to get a joint resolution in place because it does amend our Constitution, but it is still very worthy. So there is a joint resolution for legalization by Representative Canales and a joint resolution for medical cannabis by Representative Larson. You might have noticed he's the Republican representative who has been in the news recently because he was PolitiFact checked as being correct about talking about opioid reduction. So really pleased to see so many bills that have been authored. I just wanted to let you know that if you go to texasnormal.org/87-TX-ledge, which I can drop in the comments later, you can check out all of the bills that have been filed, the over 24 bills, or almost 24 bills, excuse me. And you'll also find 3 action alerts where you can email your legislator to let them know that you support medical cannabis, penalty reduction, and legalization. You can pick one or you can do all 3. So let's briefly touch on what to expect for the upcoming session because it is starting in just over a month, if you can even believe it. I can't believe it. It's been kind of a whirlwind a little bit. But so January 12th, they are gaveling in to make their decision on what all of the protocols and procedures for the upcoming session will be. We have seen a little glimmers of perhaps what might be happening. Most recently in the news, it was announced that the House has decided that on opening day, whenever they are deciding all those protocols from the floor, that no media or public will be allowed on the actual House floor. There is a gallery that is above that they're saying that a limited amount of people will be able to be in and be participating in. So I'm there will be much more detail about that, I'm sure. In fact, media may be in the gallery all session is what was insinuated. So I think that gives you a little bit of an idea of how different it might be. There might be sign-up lists that you have to register to even be able to be in the gallery, but perhaps maybe broader access to live streaming and virtual testimony may be available. We won't really know for sure until either they publish what they have agreed upon as a package, or on the actual 12th whenever they decide. So another one that I wanted to mention, another thing that we found out, is we are looking at dates for educational exhibits in the hallway. Our understanding is that it will really probably truly only be legislators walking through that hallway, and that if they do hold exhibits, they will have to be unmanned, and that we are also unable to reserve the auditorium at all, and that may also extend to other meeting rooms. This is because they're going to be using them to allow for social distancing during testimony. So it sounds like likely people will be on the dais. They will be separated by plexiglass. There'll be a limited number of people that they will rotate out through. I'm not sure what kind of virtual component will be included. I'm very hopeful that there will be a virtual component. For years, we've been hoping for a virtual component. So maybe 2021 will be the year. We'll see. So to that end, because there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going on, what we are going to be starting to doing, let me say that sentence again. What we are going to start doing next week is putting out a submission form for patient testimonies, so that you can put your information in and put it in through the form. We'll have someone who will help craft it into a full one-page testimony. Then they're going to get with you for your approval to make sure that you approve of it. And that testimony will be going to hearing committee members and any other targeted needs that might be in the legislature. For example, perhaps there is someone that needs to hear specifically about someone who has, let's say, cancer, and XYZ testimony pertains to that. We might create a packet and email that to them, so that we can make sure that we're doing very targeted interactions. This session is going to have to be more targeted than ever before. Pure constituent interaction is what is going to be the most important thing, and what we're really going to be focusing on. So tune in next week for that testimonial submission form, so that we can make sure we have this done well in advance. We will probably start seeing hearings in mid-February. Not that we will be scheduled in mid-February, but that will be when they start. So I expect by March, everything will be full throttle. April, things will be moving fast. And as we know, if you haven't made it out of the house by the end of April, it's usually a difficult task to make it forward. So we want to be ahead of the game. And whenever you see that, please make sure that you share it, because it's not going to just be patient testimonials, but it'll be testimonials about how maybe the law has negatively impacted you because you've been arrested, and all of these other reasons, right? And also, next week on the 12th, so December 12th at noon, we will be hosting a Texas marijuana conference call for the whole state of Texas. You can register for it on our website. There is a link to it. And what we'll be talking about is more about the session, what to expect, some of the policy goals that we have, ways that we're going to be organizing. So kind of digging into what I've been talking about a little bit more deeply. And then following that, it's going to be January. I can't even believe it. And January 6th is going to be our next open meeting, is what we used to call it, but now it's our virtual monthly meeting because we're not meeting. When will we ever be at the Flamingo again? I don't know, and I miss it. So that is all that I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa so that you can take it away and tell us about some of this data.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just 1 second. All right, there we go. All right, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is, sorry, let me just move that out of the way so I won't be distracted by that. What I'm going to talk about tonight are the arrest patterns that we're seeing in the state of Texas in relation to marijuana possession. Sorry, now it's not going forward. Okay, there we go. All right. So a quick introduction about myself. I'm Vanessa, and I am a graduate student at Texas State. I'm in the legal studies program. As a part of that program, we're required to have an internship, and I was really lucky and really grateful to get in touch with Jax and with Texas NORML. And this has just been such a great internship. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to supporting Texas NORML in the future in any way that I can. One of the main reasons I've enjoyed this internship and why I like this kind of work too is I feel like data and policy are a perfect match, and I really love analyzing data and looking at how we can use it to make more informed policy suggestions. So the areas of focus that I've looked at mostly during my internship have been the impact of House Bill 1325, prosecution and policing, and to see if there's any juxtaposition between those two things. We know that prosecutors have stopped pursuing charges for many possession-related arrests. However, police are continuing to arrest. I've looked at trends in different counties, also looking for outlier counties, and made a few projections as to what we might be able to anticipate for the 2020 numbers. Some limitations to the research that I've conducted. DPS actually puts out a really great spreadsheet every year that gives really detailed arrest data. However, this has been delayed for the 2019 numbers. They have released their Crime in Texas report, but the more detailed information that typically comes out in October, November has still been delayed. I am hopeful that it will come out before the end of this year. I think this is in large part due to limited capacity at the county level due to the pandemic. All right, so prior though to not having the detailed data for 2019 yet, I was able to look at DPS's possession arrest data for 2018. So in 2018, you had more than 96,000 arrests for marijuana possession, and that is for all amounts. However, more than 80% were for amounts less than 2 ounces. When you're looking at those possession arrests for 2018, you might assume that the most populated counties would account for the most arrests. However, that is not the situation. The most populated counties in our state represented less than 30% of all low-level possession arrests. And there's even outliers within those top 5. As you can see from the chart, Dallas and Tarrant are arresting more than Bear, Harris, and Travis. This chart represents the impact of HB 1325. For years, we were on an upward trajectory of marijuana possession arrest increasing. And in 2019, following the passage of HB 1325 in June, we see a significant drop off that really has not been realized in recent history, or at least from my research, I haven't seen a drop that significant. For 2019 possession arrest, and again, this is broader information. This is not related to low level amounts. This is for all possession arrests for all amounts for marijuana. What I did to get some data on this is I used the Texas DPS data tables and created some reports that monitored the first 10 months of this year, or I'm sorry, the first 10 months of last year, and then I've compared it to this year. So between January 1st and October 31st in 2019, almost 90,000 arrests were made for all types of drug possession, and almost 37,000 were for marijuana possession. And marijuana represented 41% of those drug arrests. In 2020, looking at that same time period, there were only about 54,000 arrests for all types of drug possession, with less than 17,000 arrests for marijuana. So now, not only do we see that decrease in all types of possession arrests, there's also a decrease in the amount that marijuana possession represents. when looking at 2019 versus 2020, that is a significant decrease in marijuana possession arrest of 56%. A few projections as we're moving forward. In 2019 and in every year prior, there is an increased arrest rate during November and December. I anticipate we will see the same. Even though these numbers have dropped so drastically, there hasn't been significant change in any patterns from the past. So if our arrest rate stays about the same, and even accounting for a little bit of fluctuation, if we see that rise in November and December like we have in the past, 2020 looks like we will end with less than 25,000 marijuana possession arrests in the entire state of Texas, which is significant. A few more takeaways. Although we're seeing this positive movement in fewer arrests, it is a magnifying glass of these ongoing systemic issues. As I mentioned before, there's not a lot of change in patterns of arrest, in the types of people that are being arrested, in the age groups that are being arrested. So I think moving forward in this legislative session, although we're getting smaller and smaller samples, I think we can really frame them to show the bigger implications and the real problems with possession arrest. That is all for me. Again, I just wanted to say thank you so much to NORML and to Jax. This has been an excellent internship. And yeah, I am just super happy to be a part of Texas NORML.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that data. I'm hopeful that we're going to, get the rest of it, hopefully, before the session. I know that we're not the only people that look at that data. You were telling me a lot of other organizations use that DPS data. So, what would that mean for all of these other organizations too? Like, what do they typically use it for? Do you know?
So a lot of people use it for funding, which makes me very hopeful it will come out sooner than later. But yeah, a lot of people like to reference it to show what they need in their budgets. It also is a good way to show like the effectiveness of individual police departments, because the next step of that data after you get that really detailed arrest is to see where did the conviction come from. So that's beneficial to district attorneys. That's beneficial to pretty much anybody involved in the criminal justice system. So I really do think that the delay of that detailed data is, there's really no way to avoid the reach of COVID. So
sadly, I would think that you'd be able to do some data collection virtually, but I assume that it's just made a lot of things more difficult. So, but to your topic about taking smaller numbers and framing them, we were looking at Dallas and Houston, and people were looking at those deprioritization programs and seeing that, like, yes, we're not really arresting anyone anymore, but those that we are arresting are almost all people of color.
Yeah, exactly.
So that will be definitely more telling. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. And whenever we get to Q&A, we'll get back to chatting. So next, we're going to talk with David Bass. He's the Director of Veteran Outreach here at Texas NORML, and he also created the group called Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, and together they made a really amazing veteran movement called Operation Trapped. So what I want to do is turn it over to Dave to talk a little bit about veterans and this session.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here tonight. Let me close this box. One thing I'm interested about reference these amazing statistics. I think it's shocking to us how these numbers of arrest have dropped. We knew that passing the hemp bill would have some effect on marijuana arrest in Texas because law enforcement would not be able to tell the difference between a pre-rolled CBD joint and a marijuana joint. Indeed, definitely that had an impact. The district attorneys deciding not to prosecute people for marijuana possession, personal use possession, that definitely had an impact. I also think our work has had an impact because my first legislative session was 2013. So the 87th Texas legislature will be my 5th legislative session. And in 2013 was the first time I ever worked with Jack Finkel during a legislative session, and a lot of other amazing activists. And we got to testify for exactly one marijuana bill in 2013, which was a simple affirmative defense bill. Who sponsored that bill? I was trying to remember his name, Jax. Do you remember his name?
Nashtat?
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. Was that Dutton's or Nashtat's? I think it was
Nashtat.
Nashtat's affirmative defense
Nashtat,
bill.
yes.
Yeah.
So this affirmative defense bill, if I got arrested for possessing marijuana, would have allowed me to tell the judge that, hey, I use this marijuana as medicine for PTSD and chronic pain, which apparently I'm not allowed to tell the judge that, I guess. And so that's all the bill did. And it was an incredible experience because so many people showed up to testify on behalf of this simple little affirmative defense bill that the hearing went on for like over 4 hours. It was incredible till like midnight. It started at like 8 p.m. and went till midnight. And so it was an incredible experience, and it gave us a taste of what was to come. And now we have, I think Jack said, 20 marijuana bills currently filed for the 87th Texas legislature. So we've definitely come a long way. And so on our social media, sometimes on our Facebook page, it pisses us off. We don't like it. But we'll post something like really optimistic and hopeful, and people will come on and in their comments say, "Oh, you guys are just wasting your time. Texas will never legalize marijuana." Just really ultra negative comments. And for me, I always want to ban them. I'm like, where's the ban button? I'll ban this guy. But we don't ban them just for that. But I want to, because I don't like that negativity. Because we can look at our record as activists in Texas, and we can see that each session, 2013, 2015, 17, 19, and now 21, we have made progress. And last session, we passed a medical marijuana bill with a supermajority in the House, and we passed Representative Joe Moody's civil penalty bill with the supermajority in the House. So don't come on our Facebook page and tell us we're wasting our time, because that's not true. We're making great progress, and I'll ban you if you do. Check it out. You may go now to our Texas NORML webpage under merch and purchase your limited edition Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana patch. And this brown one glows in the dark, which you will really enjoy. And the green one is like the one we had last time. But these are very limited edition. So if you want your Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana patch, get on there and order them right now. These patches, that our Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana logo was designed by Navy veteran and former law enforcement officer Scott LaRock, who serves on our Texas NORML board. It's an amazing design. And then these patches were donated to us by one of our Army veterans out in El Paso named Rio, who has a paintball team for veterans. the veterans find it fun and therapeutic to all be together on the to compete in paintball competitions. And so these patches are like paintball teams wear. And so they're Velcro on the back. So you can buy yourself a hat or put some Velcro on your backpack, and they'll last forever. They're really cool. So get your patch. So the 87th Texas legislature kicks off on January the 12th. And we know, especially based on what Jack's just said, that we're not going to be able to do the things that we normally do. We're not going to be able to have a veterans press conference on the Capitol grounds, probably, and some other things that we normally do. So Jax will continue to give us guidance about what we will be able to do. And the vaccines are coming out. So hopefully a lot of us will start getting vaccinated soon, and that will have a good impact. But we're going into the session really having to be hyper alert to how we're going to be able to operate and how we're going to be able to influence what happens with these marijuana bills. So when new veterans contact me, they always say, what can I do? So tonight, I want to talk for a moment about what you can do, whether you're a veteran or a patient or a caregiver or just an activist for marijuana reform. And what we need to do, what we all need to do right now in the next couple of weeks is write a letter to our state representative and our state senator. That's your opening shot in the battle of the 87th Texas legislature. So you can go to you can Google Texas legislature and go to the legislative website, and down on the right-hand corner, there'll be a box and it says, who represents me? And you type in your information and all of your representatives will pop up. And then I hope that you will take the time to sit down and write a one-page letter, that's all it takes, to your state representative and your state senator. And just from your heart, tell them your concern about marijuana reform, whatever it is, and just tell them about yourself and why you want the law in Texas to change in 2021. And so I have written a letter to my state senator, Senator Don Buckingham. And Don, I started off my letter, congratulations on your reelection. And so if your representative just got reelected or your senator, then congratulate them on their reelection, whether you voted for them or not. I didn't vote for Don because Don doesn't believe that marijuana is medicine, despite hearing from me for years and many other veterans. But we're not going to give up on Don Buckingham. And so I wrote her a letter, and it's a simple one-page letter, and it tells her what veterans want in a medical marijuana program in Texas and why we want it. And my bullets are, this is what we want in a medical marijuana program. We want state licensed grow operations. We want state licensed dispensaries. We want the right to grow our own medicine. We want no THC limits. And we want to let doctors decide the conditions that marijuana can help. And so those are the 5 bullets that Texas veterans want as a minimum in any medical marijuana program in the state of Texas. And so I'm just reminding Dawn that, you know, we Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana are still out here, and we want her to support a medical marijuana program in Texas. Now we know that the Senate is the next mountain we have to climb, the next big wall that we have to knock down. We have success now in the House, but we need success in the Senate. And Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has no intention of allowing medical marijuana bills to advance through the Senate. And so Jax and others are working on that problem. And so we'll let them work on the problem, and we should focus on our representative and our senator. That's what we can influence. I don't know Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick isn't going to have a meeting with me, but I can have a meeting with my representative, and I can have a meeting with Senator Buckingham, hopefully. And so that's what we can influence ourselves personally. And so my other letter I wrote was to Representative Brad Buckley, who just won his reelection to the House in District 54. And he's a conservative Republican, a very good legislator, really great. I voted for Brad Buckley. I think he's a fantastic legislator. And Brad supports medical marijuana. Me and April Martinez and Jason Walker met with Representative Buckley early in the session, last session, and explained to him why he should vote yes on Representative Lucio's bill. And by the end of the meeting, he told us, yes, I will support this bill. I have every intention of supporting the bill because I believe cannabis is medicine. And so Representative Buckley is an ally for us for medical marijuana, but he voted no on Joe Moody's civil penalty bill. And the other day in the Killeen Daily Herald, there was an article about the new senator who was just elected to the Texas Senator, Roland Gutierrez. He has already filed a legalization bill in the Texas Senate, which to my knowledge is the first marijuana legalization bill that's ever been filed in the Texas Senate in history. And so the Killeen Daily Herald wrote an article about this. And of course they called Representative Buckley for comment. And he rattled off this long list of concerns about legalizing marijuana in Texas, like he had them memorized, which he did. And I was like, when I read them, I was like, those look familiar. And after I thought about it, I was like, those are the talking points that we heard last session from the law enforcement associations. That's what Representative Buckley was talking to the newspaper. That's the exact bullets from the law enforcement associations. And so in my letter to Representative Buckley, I discussed each one of those points. And these are what the points are, and I want you to know what they are, because we're going to see them again during the legislative session, and we're going to see them coming from the law enforcement associations. These are their objections that they present to the legislators, why law enforcement opposes decriminalizing possession or legalizing marijuana in Texas. And so the first one is societal costs. Last session, they had a couple of people from Colorado that originally lived in Colorado, and now they moved to Texas. And they got up at the law enforcement press conference and told what a horrid hellhole Colorado has become since marijuana was legalized. And if you listen to them, it sounded like Colorado was just a terrible state now. And so the societal costs they're talking about are, you're going to have 10 dispensaries in your neighborhood, and all these criminals are going to be hanging around the dispensaries and mugging you and stealing your car. And your children are going to be addicted to marijuana. And it's just this long list of societal costs, which if you've been to Colorado, I haven't noticed any of that. When I went to Colorado, I didn't notice any of that. So societal cost. And so what I did with Brad Buckley is I turned it around. I explained to him that the societal costs are to the people who are arrested for possessing marijuana. And I listed them: losing their driver's license, having to hire a lawyer for up to $10,000 to keep them out of prison. They have to, they'll have an arrest record and a criminal conviction, because normally the lawyer is able to plea bargain it, but then you have a conviction. Paying all the court, bail, and probation fees, being trapped inside the legal system in Texas, maybe for years. And maybe, if you're not lucky, actually being incarcerated. And so I told Representative Buckley the primary societal costs are to Texans arrested for possessing marijuana. It seems to me that the problem is the law. That's the problem. So that's my argument on that. The second bullet is increased use by teens. We can go out and find a whole lot of studies on this. This has been intensely studied. And most of the studies will show that the one I read just yesterday was that teen use does not go up. And so there's plenty of studies to show that teen use does not go up when a state legalizes marijuana. But what I talked to Dr. Buckley about was, and I say Dr. Buckley because he's our veterinarian, is I was a teacher at Ellison High School here in Killeen for 10 years. And I told Representative Buckley that every year students were arrested for selling and possessing marijuana at Ellison High School and all the other high schools in Texas, in Killeen. So making marijuana illegal does not keep marijuana out of the hands of our teenagers. And where does the marijuana come from that's in our high schools? Any high school student who wants to use marijuana can find marijuana right there in the high school. It comes from criminal organizations who don't care about teens using cannabis. And so I told Dr. Buckley, I would prefer that the state was in charge of the grow operations and the dispensaries rather than criminal organizations. I think that is the answer. Addiction. I explained to Dr. Buckley, marijuana is not an addictive substance. There's plenty of scientific evidence for that. What is addictive for me was the opioids prescribed to me by my VA doctors and military doctors for chronic pain from my injuries, and psychotropic medication, which I became dependent on for PTSD. That's the addiction. That's the dependency. And so for me and our Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, I told Representative Buckley, cannabis is an exit drug for us, not a gateway drug. We're not addicted. We use cannabis every day, and it helps us. And it resolves the symptoms of chronic pain and PTSD. But we're not drug addicts. Traffic-related accidents. This is very interesting, and Jack's mentioned that bill has something about driving under the influence. I could write a 20-page letter just talking about this subject. But here's the bottom line. For every single study that shows there's an increase in traffic accidents and fatalities in legal states, there is a study that shows there's not. And so this is a very complex issue. I was checking around yesterday for the most recent studies. And the most recent study I read yesterday was that yes, accidents have gone up in some of the legal states right after legalization, but then it goes back down. And their conclusion was that you suddenly have all these inexperienced people using marijuana, so maybe the accidents do go up for a bit, but then it goes back down to normal levels. But It's a complex issue. But the bottom line is, for every study that shows there's an increase in accidents and fatalities, there's another study that says, no, there's not. Medical emergencies. The law enforcement talks about that, and Representative Buckley mentioned that. And what they're talking about is people going and buying an edible at the dispensary, and you know how it goes. They take a little bite, and they're like, I don't feel anything. And they take another little bite, and they're like, I still don't feel anything. And then they eat the whole thing. And about an hour later, they're freaked out and think they're going to die, think they're going to have a heart attack. And they call the emergency room, or their wife takes them to the emergency room. And what happens? What I told Dr. Buckley is what happens? What happens is nothing. The medical personnel calm them down. They might give them a Valium, monitor them for a couple of hours, and then they go home with a big giant medical bill. And they never make that same mistake again. That's what it comes down to on the medical emergencies. This is a small issue. Brain development. There's a couple of studies that purport that they studied young people who used marijuana, and it made their brains not develop properly, and they ended up being low IQ people with issues in life. But when you really look at these studies, there's so many other factors, parental neglect, child abuse, ADHD, other mental illnesses that could be genetically inherited, alcohol, other drugs. So there is absolutely no conclusive proof that people using marijuana, that it affects their brain development. And what I told Representative Buckley is, I probably personally know thousands of people who use cannabis every day. And a lot of them live down there in Austin, and they have highly technical jobs, and they get paid a whole lot of money for doing these jobs. And they use cannabis every day, and they've been using cannabis ever since they were teenagers. And they're some of the smartest people I know. And I also told him that I know for a fact that when the Army stopped refusing to allow people to enlist just because they admitted to using marijuana when they were teenagers, or they had a marijuana arrest, these people, once the Army realized that they were screwing up by turning these people away, they allowed these people to join, and they turned out to be fantastic soldiers with very successful military careers. And so their brains were not messed up by using marijuana before they were in the Army. And all my friends who are highly functioning people, lawyers, doctors, tradesmen, artists who use cannabis every day, obviously has not affected their brain development. And I know that some of my students at Ellison High School were using cannabis, and a lot of them were some of the most artistic and creative students in the school, and went on to be very successful after high school. And I'm sure all of you can think of high school comrades who are very successful, and they used marijuana in high school. I can name one. I wasn't a friend of his, but one of them went on to become president of the United States, and he was a hardcore high school stoner out there in Hawaii, and his name was Barack Obama. And he's admitted that in high school, he was just basically a big stoner, and he became the president of the United States. So don't talk to me about brain development. Mental health. So the Representative Buckley and the law enforcement will tell us that using marijuana affects people's mental health. And what I told Representative Buckley is that post-traumatic stress disorder is an extremely severe mental health condition. And I deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. And for me, cannabis resolved issues related to PTSD so that I could function, live a happy, successful, productive life. So don't tell me that cannabis has a bad effect on mental health of people who use it and use it responsibly. Actually, it improves our mental health. It certainly has improved the mental health of the thousands of veterans in Texas who we have met since 2013 when we started our work and veterans outreach from Texas NORML. So write a letter. It's not hard. You just have to take some time. You can handwrite it. And just a one-page letter from your heart to your representative. That way they'll know who you are. Their staff will know who you are. And then continue to follow up. Jack's told us about how we can do these emails to our representatives. Once Jack's publishes the link, we can all start doing that. So this session, more than any other previous session, being able to contact our legislators through letters and email and social media. Follow them on social media. Make comments, very respectful comments on their social media, but follow your legislators on their social media so that you know what they're up to. And occasionally you can like something they say. You can make a little comment, a positive, supportive comment. And that way, when you finally get to meet with them, whether it's in person or on Zoom or whatever, they'll know who you are and they'll trust you. Whenever April and Jason and I went to meet with Representative Brad Buckley, he complimented us. He said, the way you guys are going about this is the right way to do it. He said, y'all are professional, you're serious, you're well prepared, you're dressed nice. He said, I just want you to know that the way you're doing this is the right way to do it. And so Jax always tells us we must be professional, we must be prepared, we must do our homework, and above all, we must be respectful with our legislators. And so veterans, patients, caregivers, activists, we're going into battle now, starting January the 12th. And we're looking forward to success in 2021. So thank you for listening to me tonight. I turn it back to Jax.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. So I am going to put it on gallery view so everybody can see all of us. But if you don't mind, real quickly, I want to share my screen. So while you were talking, Dave, about lobby days, I was like, ooh, I got receipts. So I found a picture. And just for comparison, I want to share this with you guys. So this was from, I believe, our 2011 lobby day? No, 2013 lobby day.
That was 2013 right there.
So this is 2013 right here. So I'm going to do a share now to a different picture. This is what we looked like in 2019.
Ah, good progress.
So we have had, from a couple dozen people to I think we ended up having a total of over 400 people on a Tuesday.
And I would also like to say that some of those people in that 2013 photograph are no longer with us. They have passed away. And so I always remember that what we're doing, lives depend on what we're doing. And so this isn't just, we're doing this so we can have a party and get high. People's lives depend on our work.
In fact, it's 5 people from that picture. have passed away. So sad reality. I have someone asking, when is lobby day? You know, I don't think that 400 people at the Capitol is probably going to happen this legislative session. So we're actually talking about virtual lobbying, creating events around that, and making sure that when we do our educational exhibits in the Capitol, assuming that they will continue to be allowed, that we make sure that they really stand out to legislators, and just we're coming up with ingenuitive and new ways to engage. So we've been talking about this for years, that relationships matter, and now more than ever, the relationships that you have built over all these years matter, because we're not going to be seeing people as much face to face, unfortunately. I wanted to share some good news. Some good news about the MORE Act. Are you guys familiar with the MORE Act? I'm going to drop a link to learn more about it and take some action on it, but essentially, it would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substance Act, and therefore there would be no conflict between state and federal laws, you know, like for medical programs or for retail programs. And it should be voted on, or it should be on the floor later this week. So that's going to be soon, not really sure when. I believe that there's also an expunction portion of it that is important. But what I thought was really interesting, and you know, maybe you have some feedback on this, Vanessa, is so when hemp was legalized in the 2018 bill and it was removed from the federal CSA, the Texas controlled substance list has to like reflect it. I forget the amount of days that it is. So if this potentially were to pass, that would mean that Texas would have to follow suit, and then what are we going to do? What's going to happen? You know, is it going to be like hemp where now you have to construct a market for it? You don't have a choice because it's not illegal anymore. But that is going to be, you know, up to the legislature. I was wondering if you had any feedback on that, Vanessa.
I think that, I mean, just looking at how things have changed following the hemp bill, you know, at the federal level and then at the Texas level, I can't see how it wouldn't follow suit. It just seems like no matter what's going on with the types of legislation, the patterns still remain the same. So I feel like, yeah, I think it would be a very similar situation where a marketplace has to be set up sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think, you know, looking at the structure of the House, it probably has a decent chance of passing the House. It'll have a harder job in the Senate, although I think I haven't looked in a couple of days, but I think that there are a couple of races in the Senate that still have not been finalized. So by the time it gets there, maybe the makeup will be different. I'm not really sure, but we'll see. I know that some of the senators were giving the House flack for dealing with marijuana. I'm like, well, we still have business to do, right? There's business to be done.
It's the 2 Senate races in Georgia. And if the Democrats can win those 2 Senate races, then it'll be 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans in the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. So that would give the MORE Act a fighting chance in the Senate, because as long as Mitch McConnell controls the Senate with the Republican majority, he has no intention of allowing any marijuana bills on the Senate floor, at least based on his past record.
Sure did love that hemp, though.
Yes, we appreciate everything Mitch did for hemp. That helped us out in Texas considerably.
Absolutely. And so Damon in the comments has just reminded me, I forgot about this, but it's also big news. The UN voted to remove cannabis from their restricted scheduling as well.
Yeah, yes, and Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, you'll be happy to know, signed on to that initiative. And so we have a veteran named Michael Krawitz, who leads the fight at the United Nations. And Michael is the veteran who got the VA to write the policy that they would no longer take adverse actions against veterans in medical marijuana states for having a medical marijuana card. And so Michael invited veteran organizations to sign on to the UN initiative. And I signed up Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. So Texas NORML and Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana can take just a little bit of credit for this good thing that happened at the United Nations.
That's awesome. Thank you for that extra information. And so a note that someone is mentioning to add on to, you were talking about brain development, Dave, one of the arguments. Well, you know, the brain can develop, you know, up into your mid-20s or something like that. And so that is a lot of the reasoning behind why a lot of markets have gone with the age of 21 as opposed to 18. And so in addition to being like, hey, there's a lot of really successful people who use cannabis, you can also make the argument that it is an older age when most of your brain development has already occurred. So in theory, if they were right, you wouldn't really be doing much damage on the development because it's like developed and stuff. I wanted to also, a few people were talking about what is going to be happening during the legislature, and I just wanted to hit a few things real quick. And of course, I dropped some links for some workshops for people to register in so that they can get more details. But the House on day one is going to, first order of business is going to be selecting a speaker. And it does seem like they have kind of pre-decided who that's going to be. It seems like it'll be Dade Phelan, who has been great at voting yes on decriminalization and medical cannabis and hemp. So that would be great for us. And he is looking to really lead the House in a bipartisan way, though he is a Republican. And so that will be a very interesting thing to see how that goes down. I don't think there will be drama, but you never know in politics. That just sneaks up on you. And then there's also, of course, we've talked about the budgetary shortfall that's happening. They're going to have to discuss that. School finance was already an issue, and now with these shortfalls, it's going to become an even bigger issue. Then redistricting. Wouldn't it be the year of redistricting is the pandemic legislation year? Great. So that can be very contentious between the parties, and I hope that that does not bleed onto what we're doing in any way, because it's important that we have very strong bipartisan support. And then another thing that I want to mention for people who are following hemp is the Texas Department of Agriculture is going through sunset. And what sunset is every 12 years, an agency is evaluated on, is it still functioning? Do we even still need to keep it? And so they'll be totally reviewing the TDA and how it works. I anticipate that they probably will offer some feedback on some improvements that can be made on the hemp program. So I hope that we'll have some opportunities for that as well. But those are some of the highlights outside of cannabis that we need to understand. These are the really top priorities of the legislature right now. And so we have to really make our priorities shine and really make it easy for them to do the right thing and vote the right way. So I think that's really important. I am just checking to see if I have any more questions in here for you guys. Did either of you have any last words that you'd like to share while I check real quick?
Well, my last word, I always have a last word. My last word is that, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 15 legal states now. I think 15 is the number, and 33 medical marijuana states. I reminded Senator Buckingham of that. And Texas is totally surrounded now by legal states and medical marijuana states. And that country called Mexico, just to the south, seems like they're on the verge of legalizing marijuana. So that will be an amazing day when the nation of Mexico legalizes marijuana. So I'm praying every day for Mexico and for their legislators that Mexico will legalize marijuana, because I think that is going to have some very interesting effects on what happens in Texas.
Absolutely. Vanessa, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I didn't, but
You're like, but cool meeting. It was great. Awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank both of you guys for spending a little time this evening with me and with the audience. I can see a ton of comments on here, but we've hit all of the questions and hit a whole bunch of links that they needed. So big takeaways from this is go check out the current bills and participate in the action alerts. I also put the action alert for the MORE Act down there. I think there have been some edits to it, so make sure that you review the state that it's currently at. And then also we have a conference call on the 12th of this month. And then we also have on the 12th of next month, a workshop where hopefully we'll now know how hearings will be run and we can share that with all of you. So on that note, I am going to bid you all adieu and enjoy the rest of my evening. I hope all of you do as well. So signing off from Austin, Texas in my spare bedroom. I'll see you guys next month. So take care.